I'm so glad the elections are almost over. From McGrath and McConnell commercials to trucks speeding down the road with Trump flags flying, it's all getting to be a little bit annoying. But as a Christian who's always leaned right politically, this time I stepped outside of my comfort zone to support Biden, a candidate I believe represented my moral compass more accurately. However, I, like many others, was disappointed in the poor performance of the Democratic Party this election, even though they did clinch the presidency. If a clearly discriminatory Trump can win the votes of many racial minorities, even in a time of racial conflict around the nation, there is a symbol of a much greater problem amongst the Democratic voter base. And that problem is the Democratic Party is going too extreme. So the question is brought before us today: what can the Biden administration do to unite a polarized electorate? And I believe there are three clear ways they can unite the electorate. First, they can continue some of the conservative policies that were implemented during and before the Trump presidency. Second, they need to make clear their support for minority groups, not just through choosing politicians, but through actual immigration and economic policy. And third, they can utilize more notable centrist politicians to fill important roles and better represent the considerable U.S. conservative voter base. I've often thought of why the Biden campaign didn't win by nearly as much as we had expected this year, and I've concluded that their policy is too extreme for many Americans. The first way the Biden administration can unify a polarized electorate is they can continue some of the conservative policies that were implemented during and before the Trump presidency. The Associated Press on November the 4th tells us that Trump has depicted the Republican Party, instead of the Democratic Party, as the new working class, uneducated party. And this, along with many of his policies, appeals to many lower-income, hardworking immigrants and minorities who feel that Trump is supporting their interests. USA Today on October the 30th tells us that an experienced Republican opinionist who wrote this article writes that he did vote for Biden this election, but he would have much preferred Trump's policies of cutting government regulations and increasing defense spending. Wall Street Journal on November the 28th tells us that many Republicans voted for Biden with the confidence that the Supreme Court would be voting conservatively for at least a generation. If Biden were to increase the Supreme Court size and fill it with liberal appointees like many expect him to do, he could further polarize the American people and put his re-election at a disadvantage. And just as I'm the ethnic minority voter that supports Biden tenuously, the second way the Biden administration can unify a polarized electorate is they need to make clear their support for minority groups, not just through choosing politicians, but through actual immigration and economic policy. CNN on July the 21st tells us that before the election, Joe Biden's lead among black voters was lower than Clinton's was in 2016, a historic low. Guardian on November the 14th tells us, however, that after the election, it was still analyzed that black and Latino voters swung towards Trump this year, while white males surprisingly swung overwhelmingly towards Biden. Now, this wouldn't be expected, of course, even in a year such as this. BBC on November the 22nd tells us that a Latino voter who has historically voted both blue and red cast his vote for Trump this year because he was attracted to Trump's anti-globalization policies that he believed helped Mexico and Trump's economic policy that he believed increased his personal income. New York Times on October the 28th tells us that since white voters swung towards Biden, many minority voters believe the Biden administration will be more obligated to support the white voter. So they have surprisingly reacted by swinging away from Biden and towards the Trump campaign, which they believe supports their economic position better. And just like I am more likely to support an administration that has officials that carry my views, at least in part, even if the leader doesn't always, the third way the Biden administration can unify a polarized electorate is they can utilize more notable centrist politicians to fill important roles and better represent the considerable U.S. conservative voter base that still exists today. NBC on December the 7th tells us that Biden has disappointed some of the progressives' dreams by cabinet picks near the center, but he is certainly reaching to the center wing of his party, which is really important for his re-election. CNN on December the 5th tells us that Biden has confirmed there will be significant diversity in his cabinet, but he didn't lock himself into a certain demographic. In fact, currently 2 of the 4 premier cabinet secretaries are filled by a white man and a white woman. Both are center-leaning Democrats that served in the Obama administration. However, The Hill on December the 4th tells us that Biden is facing huge backlash on his centrist cabinet choices from progressives who want more extreme liberals and diverse people to fill the cabinet, claiming that a large portion of Biden's voter base that voted for him this past election is progressive, so he should do a better job of supporting their interests. So let's go back to the question today: what can the Biden administration do to unite a polarized electorate? And I believe there are 3 clear things they can do. First, they can continue some of the conservative policies that were implemented during and before the Trump presidency. Second, they need to make clear their support for minority groups, not just through choosing politicians, but through actual immigration and economic policy. And third, they can utilize more notable centrist politicians to fill important roles and better represent the considerable U.S. conservative voter base. Now, because I was disappointed in the poor performance of the Democratic Party this time, and the increasing liberal Democratic policies, I will likely never support a Democratic presidential candidate again. Trump is a one-of-a-kind president with no political experience and a particularly bad personal record, prompting me to make a temporary switch. However, in-between minority voters like me can't keep voting one way simply because of race relations. If Biden's administration doesn't support its center wing adequately, many voters will fall away. I don't agree with liberal policy, and I'm vocal against it, so watch out, Democrats. The traditional biblical voters in the Southern Bible Belt could be coming back strong, not just in the white race, but in all races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. Thank you.